Well, our journey together in this series is nearly at an end. In our last episode, we'll focus on what it means to leave a legacy. What would we need to invest our lives in so that when we are gone, we'll leave something of significance behind? Another way of saying this is, how would you like to be remembered? We'll see one of the key ways of doing this is paying attention to the next generation. As long as we're still breathing, we have the opportunity to influence what we will be remembered for once we are gone.
Welcome to our Leadership Matters podcast. Phil has had the privilege of mentoring leaders and coaching ministry teams around the world for several decades, and he's really looking forward to sharing with you some of the principles that others have found helpful over the years. To access all of our podcasts as well as our leadership resources, just click the links in the description box or go to icmcanada.org/leadership matters. If you want a copy of this complete study, just click on the link to download it. Now let's join Phil for this episode.
Bobby Clinton was a professor of leadership at Fuller Seminary. In one of his studies, he noted that of the 1,000 leaders of every type that are listed in the Bible, there are only about 50 prominent leaders. Those are those that we know how they started their life, how they lived, and how they finished their race. Of these nearly 50 leaders, only about 30 kept the faith and finished their race well. This includes men like Joshua and David, Peter, Paul. Others like Samson and Eli stumbled in midlife but returned to their faith. And then there are others like Jehoshaphat and Hezekiah, which had a bit more of a complicated story. But the biblical record seems to indicate that finishing well is possible, but it's not necessarily guaranteed. Now, I'd like to spend a few moments of our time looking a little closer at one of these biblical characters. We are introduced to him as one of the spies who first went into the promised land of Canaan. At the time, he was in his 40s, and as we know, only he and Joshua were ready to take the land. But unfortunately, they were outnumbered by 10 who had kind of given in to fear and doubt. Of course, this is none other than Caleb. It must have been quite a letdown for him after seeing the promised land up close and tasting those grapes, to then spend the next 40 years wandering in the sands of the desert. This is why I think Caleb is a classic example of how to finish well in spite of the disappointments of life. During those 40 years in the desert, he had a close-up view of Joshua's rise to power and influence. And I'm sure he could have wondered, hey, why was Joshua chosen and not me? And he could have become frustrated that he could not enter the promised land due to the choices of others. He was ready to go. To add insult to injury, over the next 40 years, he buried each of his generation until only he and Joshua were left. That he did not give in to these negative emotions is what really makes him so impressive. The danger we have in reading biblical accounts, of course, is that it's easy to assume that the characters were so holy and above it all, they didn't go through the same emotions and have the same feelings that we do. But as in our own lives, they didn't know the end of the story and how it was all going to work out. It's easy for us to read it knowing it all turns out in the end, but with our lives, it's not so easy either, is it? Like us, Caleb had ample opportunity to become bitter through all the twists and turns in his life. When we meet him again, he's now over 80 years of age and on the brink of entering the promised land again. But this time with a completely different generation, the kids and grandkids of all those other ones that he buried in the desert. He had not forgotten the promise that God had made to him through Moses decades earlier. He tells Joshua, "So on that day that Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has promised me keep me alive for 45 years since that time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the desert and in the wilderness. So here I am today," he says, 85 years old. The land that had been promised to him was the hill country, protected by the feared Anakites. This was arguably some of the most difficult land to conquer and possess. Yet even at 85, Caleb was still a man of vision and faith. He had not become bitter, cynical, disillusioned. He was a man who seemed to always do things with his whole heart and was led by his convictions. He never forgot God's promises to him. He continued to accept challenges, and his faith actually grew through the difficulties of his life. So even as an old man, he did not have fear, but rather a hope for the future. he was clearly not motivated by vain ambition either, as he himself would not live long enough to enjoy the full promise. His motivation was to leave a legacy for those who were coming behind him. Yeah, I think you agree, he was quite a guy. But he is not the only one. There were others who had visions in their latter years, had a life of vision. Men like Enoch, who walked with God, or Abraham, Moses, who did mighty deeds until he was taken home, Joshua, who led Israel and served God all the days of his life. You know, in 2 Timothy 4, 6, and 7, Paul writes, "For I am already being poured out like a drink offering, and the time for my departure is near. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith." I read these accounts not just as dusty stories of old, but as a personal inspiration of what God can still do through our lives. Just as many of these had their best days in their latter years, so can we. Their God is our God, and He has not changed. The challenge is to not allow life to make us bitter and cynical. We can either live with vision for the future or live in the past and not allow the next generation to take up the mantle of leadership. Well, how about us? Have we become cynical and bitter, or are we still full of vision and hope? What kind of older man or woman do you want to be? What steps are you taking to be like a Caleb?
To view or listen to any of Phil's other podcast series, visit icm.org/Leadership Matters. His Mentoring Intelligence series discusses issues of servant leadership and how to leave a legacy by investing in others. Other series include a study of how to develop and manage multicultural teams, a series to strengthen your marriage, the first team, as well as a discussion of how to implement the equipping gifts in a local church. You could also check out our CLI, Christian Leadership Institute, which is a unique competency-based ministerial training program. To download any of our resources associated with these series, visit our library of materials at icm.org/resources.
Before I provide some final concluding thoughts, let me bring us back to 3 inevitable realities we'll likely have to deal with in some way during this season. To finish well, we'll have to deal with each of these issues: retirement, health, and aging parents. As we discussed in previous episodes, we never really retire from our calling. It is this purpose that gives us meaning in this life. So we don't have to retire from what we love, even if we have to maybe adjust the scope and pace that we can pursue our dreams. You know, practical matters such as where we will live now that our children are married and on their own, as well as determining other aspects of our lifestyle, will influence our calling during this season. You know, in our first episodes, we observed that in most societies, life expectancy has increased over the last century. So with a longer lifespan, we have to take practical steps in order that our bodies stay healthy enough to express the vision we still have on the inside. How will we stay healthy as we age? Have we adjusted our eating habits? Do we exercise daily? All these practical things, you know. Do we reduce stress in our life and have other interests and hobbies? While we do not control the number of our days, doing our best to keep our mind and body healthy will enable us to finish God's calling in our life. You know, finally, there's the issue of caring for aging parents. Many may have already laid their parents to rest, but for most this is a time of looking after those who looked after us in our younger years. Though the expectations of this will vary from culture to culture, it is likely that we'll be responsible to look after our parents to some degree as we seek to honor them in their old age. You know, the degree of our responsibility in this area will impact our lifestyle and our priorities, as we've already discussed and looked at. So as you consider these 3 areas, begin to consider how you will deal with each one of them. Maybe spend some time discussing this with your spouse and maybe changes you may have to make in your lifestyle moving forward. Well, you may have heard of the Peter Principle in leadership, first developed by Lawrence J. Peter. He basically observed that in a hierarchical organization, employees tend to get promoted until they reach a level where they are no longer competent. We rise to our own level of incompetence is what they say. But I would like to introduce you to my own Peter Principle, from the Apostle Peter. Remember in John 21:18, when Jesus reinstates Peter and informs him that one day he will not be able to do everything he once did. Someone else will dress him and lead him where he may not even want to go. The principle I get from Peter is that I'm going to have to learn to decrease so that others can increase. This is a process and does not happen overnight or even in 1 year. But the more intentional I am in facilitating this, the better it will be for me and the next generation. How do we respond as we begin to realize that others no longer seek our advice or opinions as they once did? As the next generation gains greater influence and takes on more responsibilities, what is our attitude? Do we try to hold them back or limit their influence, or in humility allow them to take more responsibility? When the time is right, will I graciously release to others the vision that I perhaps never had time to fulfill myself? Or perhaps the vision that God had given me was not just for me, but for future generations. Caleb had the vision, but he did not take the land alone. He had those from the younger generations with him as he did it. And he also did something rather unheard of in his day. He actually gave his daughter an inheritance of land. He was way ahead of his time. So what does it take, or what attributes does someone like a Caleb have? How do we keep our vision fresh as well as a positive attitude towards the next generation? We've discussed some of these throughout our series, but as we conclude this final episode, allow me to offer a few thoughts regarding the characteristics which I think are indispensable to be like a Caleb. I think the first attitude in order to become better rather than bitter is an attitude of gratefulness. Rather than a sense of entitlement or demanding that others now owe us respect, having a grateful attitude regarding our circumstances will go a far way in helping us become like a Caleb. With this attitude, I think it's more likely that we'll invest in others by mentoring them, celebrating their accomplishments. Instead of regret for why we did not or could not do the same things, we can champion others instead. We can be at peace with who we are and the level of influence that we have achieved. And we no longer have to compete for influence. The result is a contentment to run in our own lane. To be like a Caleb, I think we also need to keep our minds sharp and engage with new ideas and ways of doing things. While this is not always easy, staying mentally sharp will also include continuing to read widely and being engaged in lifelong learning. I would suggest that it is also good to continue to think big. Instead of allowing our world to get smaller, we can continue to think in macro big terms, like Caleb. He said, I'm still going to take that hill country. This does not mean we have to do it all on our own, but we don't have to retire from having a vision and seeing the big picture. So as we've seen, defining retirement as doing nothing is not only unattractive for most of us, but actually quite unhealthy. We never have to retire from serving others and having meaning in our lives. While our role and the level of our involvement will change, we can continue to have a productive life. The how may change, but we can continue to serve others with our gifts. Now, those who age well and finish their race are those who grow in tenderness and compassion. They've learned to be kind, patient, and gracious. Of course, this includes with our own spouse. Should we be fortunate enough to grow old together. And the important relationship, of course, is our Heavenly Father. Those who finish well, like a Caleb, maintain a vibrant relationship with God, and their spiritual life continues to grow and deepen. When we do not need to fear death, or for that matter, what will happen for the rest of our lives. Like Paul, we can one day say, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what should I choose? I do not know. I'm torn between the two," he says. "I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far." Maybe it's a factor of age, but every decade I'm finding myself relating to Paul's perspective more and more. As we reflect on these characteristics which I listed, do you know someone like this? What other characteristics do they have that you admire and like to emulate? Are you becoming like this? How will the next generation describe you? Well, we've come to the end of our series. I hope that these few ideas have helped you as you navigate the final lap of your race. My goal was to deal with some of the difficult things we go through in this time of life and provide you with some context to deal with these. We also then discussed some reasons we have for a new hope in the future and God's purpose for us during this last season of life. And we saw that this will look a little bit different for each of us since we all have to face our own challenges. However, like a Caleb, we can fulfill the calling that God has on our life. I just remind you that God saves the best for last. And so there's no reason to give up. He still has a plan and a purpose for your life, wherever you're at. Yes, it will look different than when you were younger, but God never retires us from meaningful service. When we all meet on the other side, on that other shore, may we be able to join the Apostle Paul and say, "We have fought the good fight. We have finished the race. We have kept the faith," knowing that there is in store for us the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to us on that day. And not only to us, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. I don't know about you, but I'm really looking forward to that day. Who knows what amazing adventures and purposes God has for us, prepared for each one of us for eternity. But before then, we have a race to run. And he's promised to be with us every step of the way. He's promised to be with you every step of the way. So thanks again for sharing this time with me. May you one day hear those words, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."
Thank you for listening to Leadership Matters. If this has been helpful, please remember to like, subscribe, and share us. Doing this will enable others to benefit from this material as well. And remember, if you would like to have your own copy of this study, just click on the link in the description box, and for any of our other leadership resources, go to our website, icmcanada.org/resources.